Friday, July 14, 2017. It was 11:45 p.m. on Bradford's Sully Lane. The streets were silent. Pavements empty. Streetlights hummed over rows of houses where nothing looked unusual. But beneath the silence, something pulsed, a phone line that never stopped ringing. Calls came in by the hundreds, then by the thousands. At first it looked like nothing more than ordinary traffic. But this wasn't customer service, and it wasn't a hotline for emergencies. This was the Sully Line, a number that would change the face of Bradford's underworld. Elsewhere, in a quiet Manchester home, tins were hidden away in a bedroom wardrobe. To neighbors, the woman inside was just another mother of three. By day she worked in childcare. By night, her house became the heartbeat of a drug network. And years later, in a Bradford basement, police discovered something that felt like it belonged in a thriller, not real life. A heavy steel canister so well disguised that when officers turned the valve, actual gas hissed out, masking the true cargo inside. 3 very different stories. A phone line, a family home, a disguised canister. All connected by one trade, heroin and cocaine flooding the streets of the UK. This is the untold story of how the Sully Line rose from a single number to a multi-million-pound empire, and how police dismantled it piece by piece. But most people will never hear the full story. They'll click away before the truth comes out. Don't. Subscribe now, because in a moment you'll see just how deep this empire ran, and why no one in Bradford ever felt safe again. Bradford, 2012. A city with a history written in industry and migration, but also one shadowed by poverty and addiction. In the streets of Manningham, one stretch stood out, Sully Lane. For years, residents had seen the telltale signs, brief exchanges on corners, anonymous faces moving in and out of houses, whispers of supply. Police knew it. Locals lived with it. But no one yet understood how one phone number was about to rewrite the rules of the drug trade. It began quietly, almost invisibly. Just digits on a slip of paper, passed from user to user. No advertising. No faces. No names. Just a number that delivered. Customers called, placed an order, and within minutes, a handoff was made. Heroin. Crack cocaine. Small wraps exchanged in seconds. This was what investigators would later call the ring and bring model. For addicts, it meant reliability. For dealers, it meant money without pause. And for the architects behind it, it meant control. At the top of the line were 3 men. Not shadowy figures in distant boardrooms, but locals, young, ambitious, and determined to build an empire. First was Ayaz, a 29-year-old from Undercliff. Organized, sharp, and respected among his peers. Ayaz was no street hustler. He was the planner, the one who made sure the system never broke. Beside him was his younger brother, Assan, 26, cut from the same cloth. If Ayaz was the strategist, Assan was the enforcer, embedded in the day-to-day mechanics of supply. Together, they formed a sibling partnership that made the Sully Line feel less like a gang, and more like a family business. Completing the trio was Aslam, 34. Trusted. Steady. The third pillar of leadership. Where Ayaz and Assan provided blood loyalty, Aslam added balance. Another set of eyes, another voice ensuring the system didn't falter. They weren't just bosses. They were directors. Each had their shift, their hours of control. Day, night. The line never slept because someone was always at the wheel. They didn't sit by the phone themselves. They managed, delegated, and made sure the dealers below them never missed a call. This was more than street crime. It was infrastructure. From Manningham outward, the Sully Line grew. A city was divided into zones of supply, and Sully Lane became the nucleus. Soon, what began as a single number evolved into Bradford's most reliable, most dominant pipeline for Class A drugs. Users didn't care who ran it. They cared that it worked, that the number always answered, that the delivery always came. And that's exactly how the directors designed it. But an empire needs more than leaders. It needs hands to keep it alive. Beneath Ayaz, Assan, and Aslam stood a hierarchy of operators. Storemen who guarded the stock, drivers who carried it, and street-level dealers who handed it out in dark alleys, at bus stops, and outside corner shops. Each played their part in a pyramid that generated thousands of pounds a week, funneling straight back to the top. The Sully Line wasn't just a number. It was a system. Stable, continuous, and ruthlessly efficient. For the directors, it was profit. For the community, it was poison disguised as order. But here's the truth. Even the strongest systems carry the seeds of their own downfall. Every handoff, every delivery, every call left traces. And in time, those traces would form a map leading police straight to the heart of Sully Lane. What began as a phone number was about to become one of the largest criminal investigations West Yorkshire had ever seen. Most people would have missed the signs, would you? If this was your street, would you have spotted the pattern or walked past it like everyone else? Tell me in the comments. And if you don't want to miss how this story unravels, subscribe now, because the next twist shows just how deep this network went. Empires don't survive on leaders alone. The Sully Line thrived because of the hidden hands. The workers in the shadows, the men and women who kept the machine running hour after hour. If the directors were the architects, these were the cogs, spinning quietly but relentlessly. One of the most important was Amir Rahman, known inside the network as the Storeman. He wasn't on the streets and he wasn't answering phones. His job was simple but critical: guard the stock. From his modest home on Lum Lane, Rahman became the keeper of the Sully Line's lifeblood: bundles of heroin and crack cocaine, carefully packaged, weighed and ready to be dispatched. His house turned into a warehouse, and for his loyalty he earned hundreds of pounds every week. To his neighbors he was just another resident. To the line he was irreplaceable. Then there was Sheraz Mahmood, the phone man. His task wasn't physical. It was technical. He made sure the number never died. When police traced one SIM card, Mahmood had another ready. When calls needed to be diverted, he handled it. Every technical safeguard, every swap, every reroute, it was Mahmood's responsibility. In a network built on a single phone line, he was the guardian of communication. Without him, the Sully Line would have fallen silent. And beneath them, the streets were alive with dealers. Some were seasoned men, hardened by years in the trade. Others were heartbreakingly young. One of them was Harim Hussein, barely out of her teens. Still a teenager when she joined, Harim carried wraps of heroin and crack through Bradford's neighborhoods. Sometimes she worked alone, other times with her driver, Mohammed Vanid Khan, a man twice her age. Together they answered the ringing phone, making deliveries in alleys, on curbs, in parked cars. For Harim it was supposed to be quick money. But in reality, it was a trap, binding her to a system that cared nothing for her youth. Others joined the retail tier. Mohammed Zahid from Leeds, Mohammed Asfan from Bradford. Both part of the chain, their job to push supply directly into the hands of users. David Coates, once a soldier who had worn a uniform with pride, now carried drugs instead of weapons. Shahzad Salem, another local man, added his efforts to the runs. Luqman Nazir coordinated deals, moving in and out of the network. Even Malachi Hodgson, a talented footballer with a promising future, found himself tangled in the Sully Line, his career swapped for cash made in shadows. It was a pyramid, each level feeding the one above. From directors at the top to street dealers at the bottom, every role had purpose. And that's what made the Sully Line so powerful: not chaos but order. A criminal empire running like a business. Yet, behind the mechanics of supply there was something darker. These weren't just names on a charge sheet, they were people whose lives had diverged in tragic ways. A teenager who might have gone to university. A soldier who once served his country. A footballer who could have played under stadium lights. The Sully Line didn't just destroy communities with drugs, it consumed the people working for it. Still, efficiency has its weakness. What gave the Sully Line stability also made it noticeable. A system so consistent, so dependable, that it began to leave a pattern. And patterns, once seen, can never be unseen. The very structure that kept the Sully Line alive, the phone man, the storeman, the couriers, was about to betray them. The footprints they left would lead investigators directly into the heart of Manningham. What do you think? Should young people like Harim or Hodgson be punished as harshly as the leaders, or shown mercy for being pulled in so young? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're still watching, you already see the cracks forming in the Sully Line. Don't miss the next revelation. Subscribe now before the trail goes deeper. For years, the Sully Line had blended into Bradford's background noise. To outsiders, it looked like nothing more than the daily ebb and flow of city life. Cars pulling up, quick exchanges, anonymous faces disappearing into side streets. But to those living on Lum Lane, something felt different. The activity wasn't random anymore. It was constant. Relentless. Residents began to complain. Mothers walking children to school saw the same cars pulling up at odd hours. Shopkeepers noticed unfamiliar faces, always staying just long enough for a handoff. To the community it was suffocating. To police it was a signal. The first real clue didn't come from a raid. It came from numbers. Detectives began to look closer at the traffic on one particular phone line, the same line residents whispered about. What they found was staggering. Between July 2017 and August 2018, the Sully Line handled over 229,000 calls. On paper it looked like a call center. But these weren't customer complaints or appointment bookings. Each call was short, repetitive, and often traced back to phone boxes across the city. The pattern was clear. Orders placed, orders answered, drugs delivered. Over and over, day and night. This was the paradox. The Sully Line had designed itself to be invisible, rotating SIM cards, diverting calls, rerouting whenever a number was compromised. But that very effort to stay hidden created a footprint. To investigators, the constant switching wasn't camouflage, it was a red flag. Surveillance teams were deployed. Plainclothes officers parked quietly along Lum Lane, cameras recording the comings and goings. They watched deliveries leave Rahman's house, the storeman turning his home into a warehouse. They tracked couriers as they moved through the city. They began seizing phones, pulling SIM cards, and mapping every number. Each recovery gave police another thread, and soon those threads wove into a web that matched the Sully Line's pyramid exactly. Directors at the top, operators in the middle, dealers at the bottom. The operation was no longer untouchable. It was charted, documented, and ready to be dismantled. One story highlighted just how deep the investigation had cut. Mujahid Mahmood, one of the trusted operators, tried to convince the jury he was nothing more than an ordinary man. He claimed unemployment, an old second-hand car, and only £60 in his bank account. He insisted he wasn't the type to be pulling in millions. For a moment he almost sounded believable. But then came the twist. Released on bail during his trial, Mahmood vanished. Instead of returning to court, he boarded a flight to Islamabad. The case continued without him, and he was convicted in his absence. The empire he'd worked so hard to protect had collapsed around him, and yet he chose to run. His disappearance only cemented the scale of the operation in the public's mind. Meanwhile, stash houses were raided. Inside Rahman's property, officers uncovered stockpiles of heroin and crack cocaine. Bundles of cash. Digital records pointing directly back to the line. Every seizure, no matter how small, painted the same picture. This was industrial-scale supply, carefully managed but now unraveling. By 2018 the walls were closing in. Surveillance, call data, community reports, all roads pointed to the same conclusion. The Sully Line wasn't just another street-level network. It was a business worth millions. And like all businesses, once you understood its systems you could shut it down. The next step wasn't watching anymore. It was acting. Armed with months of evidence, West Yorkshire police prepared for the strike that would bring the Sully Line to its knees. If this was your street, would you have noticed the pattern, or walked by thinking nothing was wrong? Tell me in the comments. And if you don't want to miss what happened when police finally made their move, subscribe now, because the next chapter shows how an empire collapsed in court. The day finally came when silence broke. Months of surveillance, raids, and phone seizures had built a case so overwhelming that even the Sully Line's leaders could no longer hide. Their empire, once invisible, was dragged into the harsh light of Bradford Crown Court. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Reporters filled the benches. Families of those accused sat in the gallery, whispering in disbelief. On one side of the aisle stood the men who had built a business that never closed. On the other, prosecutors armed with evidence. Thousands of phone records, bags of seized drugs, wads of cash, and the testimony of officers who had pieced the puzzle together. Judge Jonathan Rose presided. His words would later echo across headlines. This was a wicked and greedy trade. A business that never closes. One that exploited addiction, ruined families, and treated people as customers to be drained. At the top of the pyramid, sentences fell hardest. Muhammad Ayaz, the 29-year-old organizer, received 13 years and 2 months. His younger brother, Muhammad Assan, 26, was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Beside them, Tasawwur Aslam, 34, was handed 10 years. But the law didn't stop at the directors. Beneath them, the lieutenants faced their reckoning. Amir Rahman, the storeman, received 8.5 years. Sheraz Mahmood, the phone man, was sentenced to more than 5 years for ensuring the line never went silent. And then there was Mujahid Mahmood, the man who fled mid-trial to Islamabad. Convicted in his absence, he was sentenced to 10 years, with investigators later valuing his profits at more than £2.5 million. When he eventually returned to the UK, justice waited. He was rearrested and given extra time for failing to surrender. Then came the street-level operatives, the faces most users saw, but who had reaped the least reward. Harim Hussain, just 22, received 3 years and 9 months. Her driver, Muhammad Vanid Khan, 45, was jailed for 4 years and 2 months. Muhammad Zahid and Muhammad Asfan were given shorter terms, both under 3 years. David Coates, the former soldier, received 4 years. Shahzad Salim got 18 months, while Luqman Nazir was handed 3.5 years. And then there was Malachi Hodgson, the young footballer. The judge described him as a man of good character who had made a grave mistake. He avoided prison, receiving a suspended sentence with unpaid work and a curfew. 80 years in total. 80 years that drew a line under one of Bradford's most prolific criminal networks. But behind every number was a life broken. The addict who called for their next fix. The teenager who chose the wrong friends. The soldier who never found his way home. For the community, the sentences were relief, but not celebration. Addiction still gripped the streets. Families still buried loved ones lost to drugs. The Sully Line was gone, but the demand it had fed remained. And Bradford wasn't finished. While one network crumbled in court, other secrets were surfacing. A mother hiding tins of crack in her wardrobe, and a gas canister concealing a fortune in cocaine. Do you think the sentences matched the crimes? Were 80 years enough for an empire that destroyed so many lives, or not nearly enough? Tell me below. And if you want the truth about the cases that followed, subscribe now. You won't believe how ordinary homes hid extraordinary crimes. As the Sully Line's leaders settled into their prison terms, another story unfolded, not in Bradford's alleys but behind closed doors in Manchester. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary family home. A nursery worker, a mother of 3, working shifts to provide for her children. Her name was Amira Noor, and to her neighbors she was just another parent navigating life's daily struggles. But behind the wardrobe in her bedroom, detectives found something else. Tins. Inside them, 403 wraps of crack cocaine and 363 wraps of heroin. Alongside the wraps were bulk quantities worth far more when cut down for street sale. The estimated value? Over £115,000. Freezer bags, scales, even a spoon stained with brown powder told the story. This wasn't casual possession. It was a business. Her partner, Michael Hassan, was already known to police, a repeat Class A dealer with a history of prison time. Their relationship had transformed Noor's home into an outpost for supply. She even rented cars, nearly 10 of them, to help Hassan move stock between Moss Side and Bolton. By day, Noor tucked her children into bed. By night, she fueled a network that profited from addiction. When their case reached Manchester Crown Court, the judge was blunt. Noor wasn't a victim. She wasn't coerced. She was a willing participant, described as confident, capable, and fully aware of what was happening. She received 4 years and 1 month. Hassan got 6 years and 8 months. And just as that case shocked Manchester, Bradford was about to reveal another secret. In 2021, surveillance officers watched as Farouk Mir, a 44-year-old with a history of violence, carried a heavy canister into a property on Cornwall Place. To the untrained eye, it was nothing unusual. A gas cylinder during a home renovation. But when investigators opened it, real gas hissed out, a clever disguise. Inside the shell, officers discovered 14 kilograms of high-purity cocaine hidden in plain sight. The street value? Over £1 million. The search didn't stop there. Another property revealed heat sealers, an angle grinder, and a banknote counter, the tools of industrial-scale trafficking. In the garden they even found a semi-automatic pistol. For this, Mir was sentenced to 18 years. His associate, Safraz Latif, received 11 years. These cases showed something chilling. It wasn't just phone lines or shadowy street corners. Drugs were hidden in wardrobes, basements, and canisters that hissed with gas. Ordinary homes concealed extraordinary crimes. When you walk down your own street, how can you ever really know what's happening behind closed doors? The Sully Line proved an empire can grow from something as simple as a phone number. Noor and Hassan showed how family homes can mask double lives. Mir and Latif revealed how traffickers engineer deception with frightening sophistication. You've stayed with me to the end? Most people never do. That means you see the truth others ignore. Subscribe now because the next case takes us even deeper. The British-Pakistani family exposed in £14 million cocaine Birmingham airport bust. Miss it and you'll miss the kind of story that changes how you see the world around you.